Listen up, weed lovers. It's 420 month, and IndieCloud.co is here to elevate your celebration. Get a massive 42% off all weed, edibles, and vapes for the entire month of April in our biggest sale of the year. This is a special year to celebrate 420, as it marks 6 years since the sale of almost all cannabis products was legalized across the country. This allows IndieCloud to deliver to you dispensary-grade legal products discreetly delivered straight to your door. No medical card needed. IndieCloud has something for everyone. Whether you're a seasoned toker or just starting out, you can explore the world of weed safely with our award-winning Soda Shop Gummy Series, our 12 strains of flower, or our record-breaking selection of vapes. Celebrate 420 responsibly all April with IndieCloud. Discreet delivery, top-shelf products, all month long. Head over to indiecloud.co/spring24, that's C-O, not .com, to snag 42% off your first order.
New World Order finally taking over, COVID was controlled, and World War III on the brink. Follow me down the rabbit hole about current events. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the rabbit hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we are talking about current events. So this is the current events. I think it's like part 4. This was actually requested by a number of you. I had Edward, Rick, Rachel, and probably about 3 or 4 other people request this episode or something to do with current events. And I have been going in order of when I get suggestions, but it's hard when all these things are happening right now and everyone's like, cover these things right now. So I went ahead, threw together a current events episode. I'm still going down my list of suggestions. I want to give a huge thank you to all of you that have sent in suggestions. I promise I will get to them, but there's so many right now that it's going to be a while. Literally for the next year, I'm just going to be covering suggestions. So if you haven't heard your suggestion yet, it's because I'm going as fast as I can. So thank you guys. And with that, if you guys have information about whatever episode you are suggesting, you can send that in and I'll use that as like a launching point for my research. But you don't have to. That's just completely up to you. So let's get into it. Let's get into these current events because there's a lot happening right now. So we're going to start with the COP28. So the Conference of the Parties to the Convention is a climate change initiative that the world basically has been working on for a while. So if you remember back in 2015, COP21 happened, and this led to the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is a legally binding international treaty on climate change, and it was adopted by 196 parties. The goal was basically to limit global warming by 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of this century. This was actually pretty controversial in our country because Trump was our president at the time, and he didn't want to agree to the terms that they were trying to put on the U.S. during the Paris Agreement. Basically, he saw that it wasn't fair to America because we would be required to minimize emissions more than most of these other countries, and which some of them have like more emissions than we do, and they weren't required to do what we were required to do. So he was like, this isn't fair to the US. I'm not signing it. But when Biden got into office, one of the first things he did was sign the Paris Agreement. So there's quite a bit of back and forth between the parties in our country over this. Anyways, so the next conference, the COP28, will happen November 30th through December 12th of 2023. So it's coming right up. And this will take place in UAE. And they're trying to get together to talk about how well the Paris Agreement is coming along and what are like very specific things to continue to move forward and to continue to limit climate change. And they're expecting like 70,000 people to attend. Like a lot of people, and everyone from like world leaders to private sector representatives. You have like 5,000 of these people are going to be press. It's going to be huge. So what's the problem here, right? Well, first of all, is climate change even real? Let's start there, right? Because we are conspiracy theorists, so we're going to talk about everything. If climate change isn't real, then they're just like getting together to figure out how to control us. Like, is this just another way for the New World Order to try to control us, try to start taking over the world a little bit more? You have everyone working together toward one goal, which sounds nice, but it also sounds like this global elite trying to control the world. Imagine that. We actually kind of saw what happens when we try to implement too much climate change or like green things in Texas in 2021. So in February of 2021, there was a major freeze in Texas. I'm sure most of you remember. And it was actually extremely abnormal for this part of the country to be freezing because Texas had been required to use like a certain amount of green energy. Many people didn't have power, didn't have hot water. I mean, there was a lot of food shortages as well. And like this was all during a major freeze. People, like a bunch of people died from this. Somewhere between 250 to 700 people died during this freeze in Texas. Because you have wind turbines and solar panels that are failing because they're frozen, they're not working. And Texas had been required to use this green energy. Had they just continued to use the not green energy, then these deaths wouldn't have even happened. I mean, I guess I can't say that because I'm sure some of these deaths happen from like car accidents or different things that happen when freezes happen. But you're not going to have people that are in their homes freezing to death because they don't have heat and they don't have power. They don't have water. They don't have food. They don't have things at home. But this all just seems like a way for the New World Order or like the elites to control the way we heat our homes or the way we go about heating our water. Like, I mean, also, the New World Order thinks that the population is too large. So I'm sure they were probably extra pleased with the fact that people died from this green initiative, you know? And now they're getting together to make an even more detailed plan as to how to control us moving forward. What they can tell each country to do and what each country needs to do to come together for this climate change, which we're not even sure is a real thing. Now, I'm not against like green energy, you know, whatever. I think that if we can use it, great. We should also be able to like rely on Old Faithful whenever something as serious as this freeze comes along. That way we don't have people dying because they're frozen in their homes. I don't know. It just all feels like a way for more people to control us and to create fake chaos, fake panic in order for us to hurry up and implement a bunch of things. I mean, we've seen this time and time again with 9/11 when there was panic about, you know, we're under attack. They can sign in whatever they want. We got the Patriot Act from that. When COVID happened and you have all this fake panic it was actual panic, but it was orchestrated in order for them to implement all kinds of freedom restrictions. I mean, there were talks that they were going to, if you get pulled over and you're not an essential worker, you're going to get a ticket, you're going to get a fine, you're going to go to jail potentially because you should not be out and about during COVID. Like, there are some crazy things that they're like, well, panic and chaos lets us implement whatever we want. So if we are panicked about climate change and about something as serious as like our world is ending, then of course we're going to allow them to implement whatever in order to keep us safe, even if it's all made up and propaganda. Anyway, since we're on the topic of COVID and fake news, let's talk about COVID. There was a freedom of information. There have actually been a lot of freedom of information inquiries into the COVID situation. And several of them have established that everything about COVID was manufactured. That the Pentagon controlled everything from the pandemic, like about the pandemic from the very, very beginning. From the very beginning. That was all political theater. Like all the things were just political theater to cover up the fact that it's controlled. Even the FDA vaccine approval, like everything. I mean, and this should come as no shock or surprise to any of you, but it's coming out in like actual like paper form where like people who have been saying, oh, you guys conspiracy theorists, you guys are just making all this up. You're just against, you think it's all made up. Yes. Yep. It is all made up because now they're coming out with the paperwork saying, haha, we made it up. Sorry. Oops.
Listen up, weed lovers. It's 420 month, and IndieCloud.co is here to elevate your celebration. Get a massive 42% off all weed, edibles, and vapes for the entire month of April in our biggest sale of the year. This is a special year to celebrate 420, as it marks 6 years since the sale of almost all cannabis products was legalized across the country. This allows IndieCloud to deliver to you dispensary-grade legal products discreetly delivered straight to your door. No medical card needed. IndieCloud has something for everyone. Whether you're a seasoned toker or just starting out, you can explore the world of weed safely with our award-winning Soda Shop Gummy Series, our 12 strains of flower, or our record-breaking selection of vapes. Celebrate 420 responsibly all April with IndieCloud. Discreet delivery, top-shelf products, all month long. Head over to indiecloud.co/spring24, that's CO, not .com, to snag 42% off your first order. Summer is the season of hot temperatures, outdoor adventures, and refreshing water activities. Summer is also the season of rough on your feet, causing dry, cracked heels and toes. Introducing Babyfoot, the original exfoliation foot peel that contains 16 natural extracts formulated to remove dead skin cells in 3 easy steps. Apply the booties, relax for an hour, then wash your feet. In 14 days, you've got baby smooth skin and your feet have never been softer. Letting dead skin cells build up over time is hazardous to your foot health. Our professional-grade DIY products, like our original exfoliation foot peel, our men's foot peel, or our moisturizing mask, are some of the best foot care products on the market, created with your foot health in mind. Pamper yourself with a spa day from the comfort and convenience of your own home with Babyfoot. If you want a chemical-free, easy-to-use exfoliating process from the company that created the original foot peel, it's time to treat yourself to Babyfoot. Go to babyfoot.com and use the code SUMMERFEET24 and get 20% off your first order with Babyfoot. That's babyfoot.com and use the code SUMMERFEET24.
So, a whistleblower came out of retirement during COVID. Her name is Sasha Latypova, and she was a pharmaceutical executive and a lead researcher when she was working. But again, like I said, she came out of retirement to go over all of this information. So she said that she knew something wasn't right because the government wasn't following established clinical research and public health protocols. You work in pharmaceuticals your entire life, you know that they have to go through so many steps. They have to jump through so many hoops before they can take a product to market, right? Like you can't just bring something to market and call it what it is. Everything has to be so precise and so exact. There can only be so many side effects, or the side effects can only be so severe, or whatever, right? And you have to put those side effects on the label so everyone knows. It's like when you watch those drug commercials and they're like, the side effects include diarrhea and vomiting and death or whatever. You know, like they say all the side effects because they're required to. They're required to do clinical trials. They're required to do animal trials, all these different things before they can take a product to market. None of that happened with COVID or with the COVID vaccine. So she was specifically concerned about the variability of the vaccine from lot to lot, which that was initially what got her attention and had her like start really digging into all this stuff. Being a pharmaceutical professional, she understood, like what I said, the consistency that there needs to be from lot to lot. And she just wasn't seeing it here with the COVID vaccine. And there like really shouldn't be any variation. So this lot has to be the exact same as that lot over there. And if they're not the same, or they can be off by like 0.01%. I don't know. I made that percentage up, right? But like just a smidge off. That's okay. But the variations were huge. She said that these products were varying about 1,000 times from lot to lot. 1,000 times different from this lot to that lot. They could put anything in whatever. It doesn't matter. They're just going to put that in your arm. And they're going to cause so much chaos and so much panic that you're going to run out and grab this vaccine really quick, even though Joe Schmo next door getting the exact same vaccine could be from a different lot, and you guys are going to get completely different side effects, which we are seeing actually in the world. Latypova actually refers to the public data from the CDC's Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System when she states, quote, "The total volume of adverse events and deaths was 10 times higher than all the previous vaccine products combined. That's a lot. She said the government was using fraudulent manipulation of public perception to control the narrative. Imagine that. And use laws that were put into place before the pandemic even started to cover up their tracks. Yes, you heard me right. These laws were put into place when Obama was in administration. And it's so convenient that all these laws were in place before a pandemic even started. And in fact, I've heard several places, I don't think I put this in the sources, but I've heard several places that when Obama was in office, somebody said, or it has been said, that there will be a pandemic during Trump's administration. And imagine that, there was. So some of these laws that were put into place, like when it comes to national, like a national emergency or national health event, they don't require clinical trials for an emergency vaccine. And there needs to be no informed consent at all. So you don't need to know what's going on or what's going into your body. Just shut up and take it. Under Obama, the informed consent laws were amended to say, if it's not in the best interest of the subject, there needs to be no informed consent. But who decides if it's in the best interest of the subject? Shouldn't I decide what's in the best interest of my body, and you should decide what's in the best interest of your body? And in fact, me as a parent, I get to decide what's in the best interest of my children's bodies. But no, because the government has decided that there's a national emergency, now the government gets to decide what's in the best interest of everyone's bodies, to include your children. This is all under public health emergency laws, which might be why they kept extending the public health emergency longer than they needed to, because they were like, well, we have all these laws that we can implement, all these things that we can do under these public health emergencies. So let's just keep extending the public health emergency. And the vaccines were considered emergency countermeasures. So they weren't even considered vaccines. They're emergency countermeasures for this public health event that we're experiencing. And these laws were established in 2013. So if you want to know, 6 years before the pandemic even started, that's when these laws were put into place. They had no idea it was coming, right? And no one thinks it's weird that we can't hold the manufacturers responsible for these adverse effects. They didn't do any clinical trials on these countermeasures. And they're not even considered vaccines. And we can't sue the manufacturers if something goes wrong when they're varying lot to lot by 1,000 times. They're so drastically different. And they didn't tell us what the side effects were. They told us when we got the vaccine, yeah, you might get a little nauseous, you might get a little sick, right? Whatever, if you got the vaccine. But they didn't say your heart might just stop, even though now they're finally connecting those dots years after they injected most of the population. You know what I think is absolutely ridiculous, though? Because people have sued gun manufacturers for shootings and have won these lawsuits because somebody else picked up a gun and shot it. And it could have been any gun, but that gun manufacturer got sued, right? But we can't sue vaccine manufacturers when we don't control anything about the vaccine. Like, they literally create everything about it and then put it in our arm. We don't even put it in our own arm. Somebody else does it. And we can't sue them, but you can sue somebody. You can sue a gun manufacturer for somebody picking up a gun and shooting it. Now, don't get me wrong. I think shooting people, you should not be shooting people. But at the end of the day, I can go sue a gun manufacturer because Joe Schmo down the road shot me with a Ruger, right? But I can't sue Pfizer because they caused my husband to die from his heart exploding. This is ridiculous, right? But this is Freedom of Information inquiries that are coming out. This is actual paperwork saying, this is actually happening. We're not making this shit up anymore. This is real life. Now, all those people that are like, you guys are conspiracy theorists and you're just making this up. No, I'm not. None of this is conspiracy theory. This is real. It's a current event on my conspiracy theory podcast. But guess what? It's not a conspiracy anymore. It's real life. Well, let's get into an actual conspiracy theory. Are we entering World War III? I think that's a real question that we should start asking. So there's a famous quote out there, and I'm not sure, it's been said that it has been said by many people. So Einstein might have said it, Truman might have said it, some random army lieutenant might have said it, who knows? But the quote goes like this: "I don't know what weapons World War III will be fought with, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones." Which, if that doesn't scare you, I don't know what does. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm obviously talking about the attack that went on in Israel just at the beginning of the month. Hamas launched an attack on Israel. So I went back and I decided, you know what? We need some history before we just go into what the heck is going on, right? And I try to give you guys history for most of my episodes. So let's get into it. Hamas it's considered a terrorist organization, and it was formed in 1987 at the beginning of the Palestine uprising. And they have come from the Palestinian Muslim Brotherhood, and they're like the most radical of the Palestinian Muslim Brotherhood, I guess. So that's why they're the terrorist organization of the Brotherhood. So Palestine and Israel have been at war for years. Like, this is not like a new thing that all of a sudden Hamas is attacking Israel. This is not new. After World War I, Britain took control of the area known as Palestine. And this land had some Jews, but mostly Arabs. But things started to get heated when the UK had to find like a national home in Palestine for the Jewish people. So the Jews felt that Palestine was their ancestral home, but for the Arabs, this was their current home, and they didn't want to move. So obviously, there's some fighting going on. As World War II was brewing, and during the war, more and more Jews began fleeing from Europe, imagine that, and going to Palestine because there's Jews there. It seems like a safe place. They need to get out of Europe because, Hitler. So they're going to Palestine. But of course, this actually caused more tension in the area between the Jews and the Arabs because you only had a small group of Jews. Now you have like a huge influx. They were also like super tired of British rule. In 1947, the UN voted to split Palestine into separate Jewish Arab states, and this meant that Jerusalem would become an international city. The Jewish leaders accepted that. They're like, yep, cool, deal, we're in. The Arabs were like, nope, we're not doing that. So, obviously, that didn't go through. So that caused the war, but in 1948, 1949, there was a war. This was one of many wars, right? So British, basically, like Britain was like, nope, we're done with this, where they washed their hands of the situation. So the Jewish leaders rose up and they declared the creation of the state of Israel. Israel was intended to be a safe haven and a national homeland for Jewish people. Makes sense. But this would cause fighting between the Jews and the Arabs to intensify. Basically, they were like, yeah, this isn't good, because the Arabs were like, this is still our home. You guys are just taking over our home and making it your home. So, the day after Israel declared statehood, 5 Arab countries attacked, and this started a war. The fighting lasted for about a year until a ceasefire caused it to stop, but at that point, Israel controlled most of the territory. So, Jordan occupied land, which became known as West Bank, and Egypt occupied Gaza. Jerusalem was divided, and the Israeli forces owned like the west part, and the Jordanian forces owned the east part of Jerusalem. And it stayed like that for decades. Obviously, there's more wars and more fighting, but like that's basically how it stayed. In 1967, there was a war that caused Israel to occupy East Jerusalem, which had priorly been occupied by Arabs, and the West Bank, most of the Syrian Golan Heights, Gaza, and the Egyptian Sinai Peninsula. So most of these had been primarily occupied by Arabs, and during this war of 1967, Israel took over, basically. The problem is, at the end of the earlier war, so in 1949, a lot of the Palestinians were required to leave their homes and moved into Gaza and the West Bank because the Israelis took over. So they're already refugees living not in their homes, and they're pissed off about that. And I can imagine, like, I would be too. And now they're living in a new place, and then now the Jews came over and took over that place too. I'm not sure who I support in this. I'm just like trying to, get all the history out there. Because I could just assume, like, if I had been forced out of my home and then again potentially forced out of my home, I'd be pretty pissed off. So Israel still occupies the West Bank and claims all of Jerusalem as its capital. The Palestinians claim East Jerusalem as the capital for a potential future Palestinian state. So they're still fighting about what's going on with Jerusalem. So the U.S. actually is one of only a couple countries that recognizes Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Wow, and Jews have moved into West Bank and East Jerusalem, which were mostly Arab occupied before. So there are about 3 million Palestinians in West Bank. They have about 2 million Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, in Jordan, and in Israel, and only about 500,000 in Syria. So that's kind of where all these Palestinians are. Mostly in West Bank, although now the Jews have fully moved into West Bank as well. So that's kind of part of the issue here. Some of the main issues are like what should happen with the Palestinian refugees that had to leave their homes in the 1940s. Should the Jewish settlements in occupied West Bank be removed, or should they be allowed to stay? Should the two share Jerusalem? Should Jerusalem be like one or the other's capital? Who knows? Should a Palestinian state be created alongside Israel where all the Palestinians can go, and now there's two completely separate states? So you have Israel, you have Palestine, and that's it. I don't know. These are just some of the questions that are being asked. So Gaza right now is ruled by Hamas, which is this terrorist organization, but they're ruling basically in a democratic way. And they are committed to the destruction of Israel. They hate Israelis. They want to kill them. So they attacked Israel in one of the most organized attacks on October 7th. And this attack was gruesome. They did some terrible, terrible, awful things. It's hard to hear about. It's hard to read about. And they killed more than 1,000 people and took at least 100 hostages. I'm not going to really go into just everything they were doing. It makes me want to cry a little bit. You guys can definitely look up like exactly what Hamas was doing in Israel if you want to know. It's pretty gruesome. But it did take Israel about 8 hours to respond, which I think if you're under such a brutal attack, you'd respond pretty quickly. So this starts to ask the question, like, were the Israeli troops told to stand down? Because apparently Hamas troops started crossing the border of Gaza around 4 a.m. versus what everyone was told, which was 6:30 a.m. So that gives them 2.5 hours of border crossing before the initial attack is considered to be started. Which they didn't just like wait for 2.5 hours before attacking. And there were rumors at the beginning of the year that there would be a staged event in the Middle East that would bring about World War III. So were they allowed to cross? Basically, this was supposed to be part of like a 3-pronged attack. So Russia was supposed to do something to cause the U.S. to get more involved in Ukraine. China was supposed to attack Taiwan because the U.S. said they would protect Taiwan. And the event in the Middle East, which would cause America to get involved as well. So then, like, the U.S. would be on a war in 3 fronts because we love to get involved in wars that aren't our own. But it didn't really happen like that because this event that happened in the Middle East has happened. The other two have not yet. So it's rumored that potentially this is all just a ploy to get us more involved. I don't know. It's quite the weird situation. So Hamas was actually created by Israel. And of course, like us as Americans love to intervene and push our way of life. So we encouraged free elections, and the Palestinians elected Hamas as their leaders. And now we've decided that they're getting out of hand and we have to kill them, right? So, I mean, we see the same thing with Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein. They were both our allies in the 80s, and then the early 2000s, we stage an event and go to war with them. I don't know if this is history repeating itself, but feels very like it is. Why, right? That was my question. Like, why do we want to get into World War III? What benefit does that doesn't benefit anybody. But it does. It benefits a lot of people. It just doesn't benefit us little commoner folks because money. Wars create money. Wars take people out of depressions. And if we are actually in a worse depression now than we were in the Great Depression, because they're calling this the Silent Depression, then World War III would be a great way to get us out of it, the same way World War II got us out of the Great Depression, right? Because we didn't want to get into World War II. We were like, that's not our war, not our problem. Money. Money is always the reason. And people in power will make more money. Could this be the New World Order trying to take over? Are they just like, I don't know. The New World Order is really trying these days, right? Because you have this group of elites that want to control the entire world. They want to, have one government, one currency, one religion, one everything, right? Instead of all these different ones. Do they need to destroy the world first in order to build back better? I'm just asking questions here. I don't know the answers. I'm just asking the questions. I don't like that this is the reason we get into wars, but, it makes a lot of sense. Happened with World War II, and this feels a lot like history repeating itself. They say if we don't learn from it, we are doomed to relive it, and I feel like we are potentially doomed and currently reliving it. So, yeah, that was, there's a lot going on in the world right now. I mean, that's not all of it, but that's some of it. Lots of conspiracies out there. Of course, my friends, until next week, stay skeptical, and I will see you all then. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Balaha, for our awesome intro.